Heliodorus gives thanks to God. Then Heliodorus offered sacrifice to the Lord and made very great vows to him who had spared his life. So after he gladly received Onias, he returned with his forces to the king. Then he bore testimony to all men about the deeds of the great God which he had seen with his own eyes. When the king asked Heliodorus what kind of man would be suitable to send on another journey to Jerusalem, he replied, "If you have any enemy or plotter against you, send him there, for you will receive him back thoroughly punished, if he should escape at all. For truly there is some power of God about that place. For he who has his dwelling in heaven watches over that place and aids it, and destroys those who come to do it harm." So this was how things turned out concerning Heliodorus and the preservation of the treasury. Simon's rage. The previously mentioned Simon, who informed about the money and his homeland, spoke evil things against Onias, claiming it was Onias himself who terrified Heliodorus and created the calamity. Simon dared to say that Onias, the man who was the benefactor of the city, the protector of his fellow countrymen, and a zealot for the laws, plotted the whole matter. But when Simon's hatred progressed to the point that even murders were committed by those he approved, Onias realized the danger of Simon's love of strife, and that Apollonius, son of Menes Theos and governor of Coele and Phoenicia, was even intensifying Simon's malice. So he went to the king, not to accuse his fellow citizens, but to look out for the common good, both public and private. For he saw that without the king's attention, matters could not reach a peaceful settlement, and that Simon would not cease from his fury. Jason makes the Jews learn Greek customs. When Seleucus died and Antiochus, also called Epiphanes, succeeded to the kingdom, Jason the brother of Onias obtained the high priesthood by corruption. For through a petition, he promised the king 360 talents of silver, and from another source of revenue, 80 talents. In addition to this, he promised to pay 150 more if the king gave him permission to establish a gymnasium as a place for training young men, and for enrolling the men of Jerusalem as citizens of Antioch. When the king assented and Jason seized the high priesthood, he at once changed his countrymen over to the Greek way of life. He set aside the royal benefits to the Jews brought about through John, the father of Eupolemus, the ambassador who established friendship and alliance with the Romans. He also renounced and destroyed conformity to the laws, and created a new civic life contrary to the customs. For he eagerly founded a gymnasium under the citadel itself, and persuaded the most noble of the young men to wear the Greek cap. So there was the fullest expression of Hellenization and the adoption of foreign customs. Because of the surpassing wickedness of Jason, who was ungodly and not a true high priest. Therefore the priests were no longer eager to serve at the altar, but they despised the temple and neglected the sacrifices. Instead, they hastened to take part in the unlawful proceedings in the wrestling school after the invitation to the discus. They counted the honors of their fathers as nothing, but regarded Greek honors as the best. For this reason, difficult circumstances overtook them, and those whose way of life they admired and wished altogether to assimilate became their enemies and punished them. For to act in an ungodly way against the divine laws is no light thing, but the following events will make this clear. When the quadrennial games were being held at Tyre and the king was present, the vile Jason sent ambassadors, since they were Antiochian citizens from Jerusalem, to carry 300 silver drachmas for a sacrifice to Hercules. Those who carried the money, however, considered it inappropriate and best not to use the money for sacrifice, but to expend it for another purpose. So this money, intended by the sender for the sacrifice to Hercules, was by the decision of those who carried it applied to the construction of battleships. When Apollonius the son of Menestheus was sent to Egypt to share in the festal proclamation of King Philometor, Antiochus learned that Philometor had become hostile to his government. So he was concerned for his own safety. Therefore, after he reached Joppa, he went on to Jerusalem. He was magnificently received by Jason and the city, being ushered in with torches and shouts. Then he encamped in Phoenicia. Menelaus buys the high priesthood. Then after a period of 3 years, Jason sent Menelaus, son of the previously mentioned Simon, to carry the money to the king and to complete the records of necessary business. But when he was commended to the king, Menelaus honored him with an appearance of authority and obtained the high priesthood for himself, outbidding Jason by 300 talents of silver. After he received the king's orders, although in no way worthy of the high priesthood, he returned, carrying the rage and savage cruelty of a tyrant and a wild beast and having the wrath of a barbarian. Thus Jason, after he undermined his own brother, was undermined by another, and was driven as a fugitive into the land of the Ammonites. So Menelaus took hold of the high priesthood, but he did not pay regularly any of the money promised to the king. Thus when Sostratus the commander of the citadel kept demanding payment, since the collection of revenue was his responsibility, the two of them were summoned before the king on this account. Menelaus left his own brother Lysimachus as his court official in the high priesthood, while Sostratus left Crates in charge of his Cyprian troops. Onias is murdered. While these things were taking place, it came about that the cities of Tarsus and Malus revolted because they were given as a gift to Antiochus, the king's concubine. So the king went quickly to put down the rebellion. He left Andronicus, a man highly regarded, to act as his regent. But Menelaus, thinking he had gained a convenient opportunity, pilfered some of the gold vessels from the temple and gave them to Andronicus. As it happened, he had already sold other vessels to Tyre and the neighboring cities. But when Onias found out exactly what had taken place, he condemned these acts, after he departed to a safe place at Daphne, located near Antioch. Therefore Menelaus took Andronicus aside and urged him to kill Onias. Thus Andronicus went to Onias and persuaded him with deceit. He welcomed him with sworn pledges and gave him his right hand. Although Onias was suspicious, Andronicus persuaded him to come out of his place of sanctuary. Then, with no sense of justice, he immediately put him to death. For this reason, not only the Jews, but also many of the other nations, took offense and were angry at the unjust murder of the man. So when the king returned from the region of Cilicia, the Jews in the city pleaded with him regarding the senseless murder of Onias, and the Greeks also felt the common hatred of the crime. Therefore Antiochus was grieved at heart and filled with pity, and he wept on account of the decency and good behavior of the deceased. Inflamed with anger, he immediately stripped off the purple robe from Andronicus and tore off his garments. Then he led him around the whole city to that very place where he sinned against Onias, and there he put the blood-stained man to death. Thus, the Lord repaid him with the punishment he deserved. Notes from the previous page. 326. This is reminiscent of the two angels in dazzling apparel in Luke 24:4 and Acts 1:10. 334. The angel in Acts 5:19-20 gives similar instructions. 4:7 Seleucus is replaced by Antiochus, who rules from 175 to 164 BC. Epiphanes means God is manifest. 4:8 A talent is a weight, here in silver, equal to approximately 3,000 shekels, or about $385. 410 The Greek way of life included the worship of pagan gods. 412 This particular Greek cap is linked to the Greek god Hermes. 413 Jason no longer kept the Mosaic law, but instead foreign customs. Ethnic tradition must never take precedence over apostolic tradition in the Church. 417 God gave the law to Moses, and for a Jew not to obey divine laws was ungodly. Equivalent to apostasy. 422 Phoenicia is on the Mediterranean coastline just north of modern-day Beirut, Lebanon. The ancient ruins of this kingdom still exist there. 426 Evil divides. It picks allies only for the moment and is undermined when pride causes new rifts. Thus, Jesus warns, every city or house divided against itself will not stand, Matthew 12:25.